Hi there, Dr. Knight. Welcome to Miracles Happen.
Thank you very much for inviting me on.
Super excited to be chatting with you today because very important topic we were talking about before I hit record. Very important topic. We're not very pretentious, very serious people, but very important, lovely topic today. So glad to have you on.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I've stumbled across through my career, and it is. It's super exciting. I actually really think it's super exciting.
Yes.
That's very American, doesn't it? Sorry about that, but it's super exciting. And there's just so much more that's going to come in this particular area. We're just scratching the surface now.
Yes. Yes. Well, so if we can start with just
Yes.
mini bio. Who are you? What do you do? We hear it in your voice that you are Australian.
I am. Yes. Look, I'm a middle-aged Australian bloke who stumbled into medicine because I had no idea what I wanted to do, and then stumbled into obstetrics and gynecology because it seemed relatively easy. There were rules, and there didn't seem to be lots of rules. If you followed the rules, you probably weren't going to get into too much trouble. That didn't work out at all, to be perfectly honest. And over my time, I've done a doctorate in the effects of isoflavones on humans. I've done some special training in fertility and endocrinology. I've set up a number of IVF units and currently run my own IVF unit. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I have begun to get more deeply into regenerative medicine. That's my work stuff. My other bit, I've got a fantastic, gorgeous wife who I adore. I've got 8 kids. I've got 2 dogs and a cat. And I like painting. That sounds weird, but anyway, I like
painting.
Painting, yes.
Painting. Oh, how awesome!
Yes, it's a new hobby. You've got to find a hobby. Currently, it's a hobby. Anyway, I like painting.
Yeah, it's really cool. So you have your left brain, like sciencey stuff, and then your right brain, artsy stuff, and really, it sounds like you kind of meld the two together when we're talking about regenerative medicine. That was a mouthful for me.
Yeah.
Because it's let's get into that. Actually, I'm curious about regenerative medicine. I was looking at your website, going, "What is this? I want to know more." So do tell.
Well, I fell into it really in many ways by mistake. I for many years I watched women who had reached the end of their reproductive career chase what I thought were dreams. They wanted to reboot their ovaries, and there have been a couple of places around the world over the last 10 years that have been offering renewable ovaries to some extent. And I must admit, coming out of very much mainstream medicine, yes, we all knew that women were born with all the eggs that they were ever going to have, and at the menopause there were none left. And the really interesting thing is that over a little while, I recognized that I had a closed brain, and that I should be more open in regard to looking at these things. And wow, lo and behold, what I've been told for decades was bullshit.
Oh, and wow.
That was kind of a little bit challenging for me in regard to the fact that I had ignored something for so long. And then it seemed to me fairly obvious that in regard to the ovaries, that if women were traveling from Australia and going, thousands of miles to cultures that weren't their own cultures at a time cost and an emotional cost and to undertake medical care in an area where perhaps they didn't speak the language, just didn't seem as though it was the best options for them. So that got me into looking at at sort of ovaries and how to change ovarian function. And at a similar time to that, my mother got a recurrence of her breast cancer, and things didn't really go particularly well. So I was looking for ways to try and help my mum. And I fell into another side of it. And these things all sort of came under the umbrella of regenerative medicine, which really is being able to perhaps reverse what we call diseases of aging. You know, there are things happening in our body. There are changes that are happening at cellular level that that clearly, with what we're beginning to see and we're beginning to see published, that we can affect in a way that is positive for us and our health. It's in many ways about longevity and health span. And if we're talking about health span for our body, then we can actually point at little bits in our body, e.g. the ovaries, and say if we're improving our body function, is this going to have effect equally in all parts of the body? And different things certainly appear to be able to do that. It's kind of like the cosmetic stuff that people do on the outside, but from the inside. So it's more than a paint job. You know, you're fixing the problem if we can get a good handle on this. And we're in the process of doing it. It's brilliant, I reckon.
It's so incredible. This is more than just, this is not preventative medicine. This is turning back time a little bit.
This is turning back time, yes.
Yeah.
And it appears that already there are experimental models that aging can be reversed in mice. And if anyone's interested in that, I would thoroughly recommend Professor David Sinclair's book called Lifespan. He goes into quite a bit, and that's a really, really interesting read.
Okay, thanks for that. It's going on my Amazon list. Damn it!
I certainly recommend that. It's an ripper. Yes, and he's Australian as well, so obviously it's good.
Clearly, clearly. Thank you for that.
That's right.
So, what kind of folks you mentioned? Obviously, people with ovaries, and also folks who you mentioned cancer. What kind of folks are appropriate for this kind of medicine?
Oh, I think it's folks.
Anybody?
Yes, it's people. It's us, and you know, the things that we care about, perhaps like our dogs and these sorts of things. Look, humans have been conducting this outrageous experiment on themselves for the last 5 to 10 decades called overeating. And there's a brilliant place to start. And it's a brilliant experiment because we've actually proved to ourselves that if you eat badly and you eat too much and you eat things that we're not designed to eat, we get obese and we get cancer and we get cardiovascular disease and we get diabetes and we get a whole pile of other things, and we die younger than we possibly could. And if we look at areas of the world where people don't do that, wow, they live to 100 and they have a health span of 90 to 95, which is amazing. Okinawans, Sardinia, California, which is not too far away, the Seventh-day Adventists there, Costa Rica, and this cute little island in Greece, in the Greek islands, the Blue Zones. And if we look at, I know Australian numbers. Obviously, the average life expectancy in Australia is about 80, and Australia has the highest health span in the world, but it's 71.
Wow.
So that means you get to spend the last, 11, 12% of your life on average unhealthy.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty good reason to perhaps have a little bit of a look at, what's going on in your life. And there are a whole pile of things that we can do to measure some of this stuff. And and I've done a little bit of measuring.
In your day.
And unfortunately, on my own N=1 study, treating your body like a frat house for half a century has resulted in living in a frat house. And there's a bit of work to do here. Hope it's not too late.
This branch of medicine deals with, okay, because I just have to say,
yes,
when I was working with a reproductive endocrinologist, not once did he tell me how to eat. He did not tell me how to eat, how to exercise, how to treat my body. He just said, take these meds. You're saying, no good.
Oh, please don't start me on that topic. I'm.
Okay, let's move on. No.
Yeah, well, I started. Yeah, no. Look, I think it's really important. I think it's the important thing. There are a whole pile of medical stuff, things that I recommend to people. But sitting way above that, I think are 5 really, really important things that just improve our lives, and they are eating right. My current view is that if people aren't doing restricted time feeding or intermittent fasting, then they're barking mad, because the data is just increasingly important, showing that that's healthy for everybody. That sleeping well is incredibly important, that some form of mindfulness and escape from the pressures of the world are really important. Having really good people around you and having good relationships is possibly the number one thing. Exercise. Yeah, so I started off I said that, didn't I? It was terrible. I've never been a huge one for exercise. So I started off doing this, hoping to be a couch potato, and doing all these other things and getting the benefit without having to do, the hard yards. And here I am now. I walk 2 to 5 kilometers every day. I jump into ridiculously cold pools. I do intermittent fasting. I've chosen to do 18/6. I do that most days a month. I probably have maybe 1 or 2 days off every couple of months, because I'm doing other things.
And with those prescriptive...
I struggle with sleeping.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I'm wondering if your recommendations for others are quite individual, like different types of intermittent fasting and different types of exercise. Does it depend on the person?
I think it's really important. One of the things that I've learned is that people don't like being told what to do. That's the first thing.
Oh yeah.
The second thing is that there's no point giving people what they need when they come in asking for something they want.
Yep.
So it's about being able to, from my perspective, engage, not in saying that's right or that's wrong, but engage sort of more in how do we talk about what's important to you?
Cool.
And then try and pick something out of that helps them go somewhere. The number of intermittent fasting is quite hard to get into, I found. It took me months, basically because I liked having a latte every morning. It wasn't if I had breakfast, but I had a latte every morning. I don't even go near dairy anymore at all. I think it's horrible stuff. There's some other things that dairy products do that I don't like as well. So so it has worked out quite well. But one of the things I kind of say to people is, look, let's pick one thing.
Okay.
We just concentrate on one thing. It's going to take, weeks, maybe months to get there. Don't worry if you haven't done it for a few days. Don't say, oh, this is all crap, and just stop. Just go, okay, I've missed a few days. Let's get back into it again.
Ah, yes.
And then as we get back into it, all of a sudden you kind of go, I know how to do that. And then I'm there. And this becomes a bit of that's a habit. And then when I've got that one nailed-ish, we can say, well, okay, what's the next thing that you think is really important for you? And how can we go down that path? And then all of a sudden, you know, a year or 2 years later, you know, you're exercising every morning, jumping in a hot, you know, a cold pool and doing intermittent fasting and blah, 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 blah. But your life's better because you've started to accumulate some really, really good habits, some helpful habits. And then, you know, you kind of become a born again sort of hippie, greeny sort of person that you never thought you'd be, and you are.
Now
And
that's my
okay.
language.
Yes. And then you start talk about outward mindsets and you know, being nice and being all the things that the President of the United States isn't. Sorry,
Uh-oh, now you're going to get me started.
I'm just watching from afar. God, blimey. Anyway.
Oh gosh, there are other choice words I might use for that.
Yeah.
Come on.
So, but that's the point, isn't it? Yeah. You know, this accumulation of good habits without being overwhelmed by having to do one thing at a time. Yeah.
I love that. So that's how this becomes an individualized process, and also a process of, I don't know if you dove too deep into my work, but I love to, I'm a big proponent of mindfulness and compassion work. So
Yes.
there's a lot of compassion work in forgiving yourself for missing a couple of days and on. Okay. Intermittent fasting is still there. It's not judging you. It just show up again.
Very right. You know, and I think one of the things that's really important about that is we don't have to get head up about being whatever perfect means. Perfect sort of whatever you want it to be. And the human body actually gets used to doing the same thing all the time. So if we become very, very regimented, the effort we're putting into it, we're not getting the same payout from it. So it's okay to have a break and then get back into it. And one of the things I noticed, I went away for a few weeks in January before this ridiculousness started. And you don't go away on something that I went and in a small group, and then say, oh no, I can't join anyone for breakfast because I'm, you know, doing intermittent fasting. So, you know, I had breakfast, and that was part of people getting together. I was quite pleased that at the end of it, I could go back to it because I felt better. And the hilarious part was that I reckon 50% of the people I was there with were doing exactly the same thing that I was, that they would all generally do intermittent fasting, and they stopped doing it for this you know, meeting and thing, and then back into it afterwards.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. So you know, it's an outward mindset. So that's a positive thing. We were paying attention to other people being around.
Yeah, you were talking about being around people that fill you up, and that maybe that was that part, you know, eating together.
Yes.
I'm wondering also about getting more specific about regenerative medicine. I saw on your website the Immunosenescence program. Is that is that under that umbrella? And I am absolutely fascinated by this. I've never heard of this. So
yeah, look, the immunosenescence stuff I think is really, really interesting. It's partly, you know, I jumped into it obviously talking to people on the back of the, you know, the recent pandemic, and on the back of me looking into things for me. Okay. Yep. Still a person and inherently selfish. I've got that gene, but also for my family. My dad's in his 80s, and therefore extraordinarily high risk if he was to get it, and it goes along also with, you know, where this is. We've got this increase in longevity in the world, but we're not getting an increase in health span. And what we're beginning to see is that as we get older, our immune system has a reduction in ability to mount an effective immune response. And we have in our body a group of cells that we call senescent cells. These cells are cells that have reached the end of their ability to divide, but they don't die. invariably, they're often called zombie cells. I kind of look at them like dickheads at a party. If you got a dickhead at a party, he's just ruining the party, and it tends to spread to people around them. If you get rid of them, the party gets better again. And senescent cells are like that.
Okay.
And as we get older, yeah, it's better than zombies, I reckon. What's the zombie, man? Seriously. Anyway, and as we get older, we collect senescent cells in the tissues of our body, and certainly by about 40, we can begin to see them on stains. This is where I first fell into it, looking into trying to help my mum. Didn't help mum, but I must admit there's now a series of small publications in humans looking at medications that can treat senescent cells. So immunosenescence is really our immune system, being part of our body, having more cells that don't work properly, and therefore creating chronic inflammation around our body, increasing oxidative potential around our body, which is really increasing aging around our body. And when we are subject to infection, not as effective as dealing with it. And one of the reasons that perhaps we're seeing in regard to influenza epidemics and COVID, where there's this proportion of elderly people that are far more vulnerable to it. So the immunosenescent stuff really is about how do we go about maximizing what our body's doing at that particular time. There's a number of things. So those 5 things that I talked about before, let's just take them as a basis for everything. Okay, everyone can do them. They're all free.
Yeah.
Okay? And that's the cool part about them. And if you do all of them, you're going to be fitter and healthier anyway. So, so from now on, I won't talk about them again, but there are other things that we can go on. 2 things that are really simple in regard to immunosenescence. One, what are our zinc levels doing? Zinc deficiency is a huge issue. As people get older, people don't consume enough in their diet, and zinc's incredibly important for the maintenance of many of the specialized cells in our immune system. And the other one, this is ridiculous. I really do sound like some sort of whack job when I say this, because the other one's vitamin C. So here we are. We've got 2 things that you go anywhere on the internet and they'll say, take some zinc and take some vitamin C. Well, yes, actually, for the immune system, those things are actually really, really important to have an optimal level of both of those.
Well, you're not a whack job on this podcast, I'll tell you what. That's really great.
And look, there are those 2 things. There are a number of other things that we also get into. Metformin and rapamycin are 2 medications that are used for 2 different things that also have some fairly specific gene activity, both of which seem to be associated with improvement of vaccination responses in older people.
Oh my God.
And in fact, in California at the moment, there is a trial looking at metformin. Metformin's a really old-fashioned medication used for diabetes.
Yeah.
And they're looking at metformin as a longevity treatment, health span and longevity treatment, which will be fascinating when hopefully that trial is perhaps published 2021, 2 or something like that. So we've got a range of things that we can put in there to try and improve outcomes. For all my ladies who come through doing their IVF, all the stuff that we've talked about to this particular point, plus others, are very much a baseline for the things that I ask them to take just to maximize cellular function.
That's so
Um,
great.
yeah, flavonoids are another one, which are really important. Polyphenols,
Uh-huh.
resveratrol's one of those. There's been a lot about resveratrol over the last couple of decades in whether it's any good or not any good, but I think it is becoming quite obvious to us that resveratrol plus some other supplements affect some compounds called sirtuins, which improve genetic repair of our cells. And therefore our genome is working better and working longer, and it doesn't hang as often, and we get less senescent cells and we
Oh,
get less aging. So we've just got this ongoing set of things that we can do that can affect not only our immune system, the ovaries, but the side effect is that it's improving the cellular function of our whole body. Since when does medicine actually have side effects that are good?
right. Good question. Also, what you were saying was those base five things, totally free. It's not like supplements are thousands of dollars.
Or some of mine are.
Oh,
But no,
okay. Vitamin C, zinc, are those thousands of dollars?
vitamin C and zinc aren't. No, that's exactly right. Look, some of the meds that we use against senescent cells, they cost thousands of dollars a course.
Ah,
So some of the things that we do, are expensive, and therein lies a problem. One of the supplements that I think is incredibly important for us, which is NMN, which is nicotinamide mononucleotide, which is a precursor to NAD, which a whole pile of people are talking about NAD these days. That runs to, $5 to $10 a day if you
okay.
take the right dose. And so that can become, some of these things can become a bit pricey by the time you
Mhm.
add them up. I mean, ridiculously, I probably take about somewhere between 10 and 20 supplements a day. It's ridiculous.
Okay.
Told me
And
I
that,
was doing that 5 years ago, I would have looked at you like a lunatic. Yet
yeah.
here I
Yep. Yet here you are. Well,
am.
you've learned a lot in 5 years, apparently, right? And
Oh,
that brings me to my
yes,
next question, which
yes.
is really important to a lot of my listeners, is ovarian rejuvenation therapy. This
Mm.
is this is astounding. Tell us what you got. I just want to know it all.
It's incredibly cool. It is incredibly cool. It started off, I suppose, in a whole pile of ways with a guy called Jonathan Tilley, who in around 2004 published in Nature that he had seen progenitor germ cells in the ovaries of mice, and let's call them, oocyte stem cells. And
Yeah.
everyone kind of looked at that and then, that's bollocks. Everyone knows that after you're born, there are no more eggs to be had, and this is just the way that it is. He ostensibly published that he had seen them in humans about 5 years later, and there were a few people that began to take some notice. He did an extraordinarily elegant study published 2015 or so, where he took some of these cells from premenopausal mice, and he used a form of genetic manipulation to put a jellyfish gene into those particular cells. The jellyfish gene causes mammalian fur to glow green under ultraviolet light. He then put these cells into postmenopausal mice who subsequently had pups, and when those pups went under ultraviolet light, they were green.
Oh
So
wow.
he definitively showed, extraordinarily elegant,
That
definitively
is
showed that those cells went over there and produced, pups there. And you could, because of the gene thing, it went like that. Um, Around 2011, Kawamura in Japan started taking pieces of ovary of women with premature ovarian insufficiency, early menopause. And he fragmented them, chopped them up into very tiny little pieces, subjected them to a series of gene activators and suppressors, aiming at trying to activate any residual follicles that might be there. And he also undertook histopathology on them. So stuff he's done is phenomenal. Anyway, in 2013, he reported the first pregnancy and baby of a lady previously diagnosed with early menopause. I think over the following, 8 or 9 years, he's done sort of 130 to 150 cases. He's got about 15 babies out of that number of women, which is not huge, but there's a group of women there who have got their own genetic babies that wouldn't have otherwise. A group this Pantos group in Greece used platelet-rich plasma, and there's a few places now in the United States doing that. Stephen Stills in San Diego started doing that around 2016, I think. There's been a number of publications of improvement of ovarian function in women with end-stage ovarian function, so women who are older, also in women with premature ovarian failure. So there was one published earlier this year of PRP and a baby being born following it with that. And the third one is stem cells. And this comes from the group in Spain, Ray's group in Spain. And they're infusing stem cells in PRP into the ovarian artery and finding an improvement in pregnancy rates. So there are three main approaches being undertaken. They're really kind of different in regard to how they're done and what's going on. There's no doubt that these affect ovarian function. There's no doubt about it. And there are now multiple papers in the peer review press that show this for all the three techniques. What we're looking for now, because let's face it, this isn't anywhere near as important ostensibly for people around the world as COVID is, because there are thousands and thousands of people creating enormous amounts of information about this pandemic, and it still seems slow. We've got maybe 3 or 4 groups who have been doing this for 10 years, and so the information and the data comes out slowly, and so who are the right group of people to use it on? Who are more likely to be helped? We don't know these things, and it'd be really great to have more data around it, but we don't, and so we go with what we can.
Right. So if one was to see you for this potential, to potentially receive this treatment, what does that look like for them? How do you work with folks around that? I don't know what the other people do around the world. I've kind of got myself involved now with what we were talking about before, in conjunction with what we just talked about there. So it's not just an operation, right?
So my particular view is a bit broader. And I haven't spoken to some of the other people doing this for a little while now. A little while would be 18 months for different reasons. And what we're doing might not be the right track.
Okay, because you need more data.
Because there's all this other really interesting stuff that's coming out that we're learning. For example, using the Yamanaka genes to reverse aging that we can see in mice models, that we can see with regrowing eyes. That's cool. God. Oh yes, that's David Sinclair's group's work as well. I mean, if you can regrow an eye, we know that we can de-differentiate an adult cell into an egg. And we know that we can de-differentiate an adult cell into a sperm, and we can do that in animals. And so it, you know, it doesn't seem overly progressive to suggest that over the next decade or so, with the enormous progress we're making in technology, that we're going to be able to do that for humans, which would, of course, make all the things we're doing at the moment pointless.
Sure.
So, you know, I think there's some really, really interesting stuff potentially on the horizon. The trouble at the moment is that it's not now. We can only deal with what we can do currently. My view is maximize the effects on the body as much as you can. We know that caloric restriction can reactivate ovarian function. Wow, that's pretty cool.
It's incredible.
That's intermittent fasting again. Oh my goodness. So intermittent fasting can improve ovarian function. Wow, because it increases NAD production.
Oh
okay, NAD production increases cellular functionality and cellular repair. We can supplement with the NMN to help do that as well. And there was a March paper that came out showing that that was effective in improving oocyte quality. So we're getting some really good heads up that there are a range of things to do. So my particular approach is depending on the age and whether it's premature ovarian insufficiency or whether it's you know, ovarian aging and people are getting at the other end. I would very much talk about senolytic therapy, killing senescent cells, good for their whole body, but, you know, ovarian function as well. The effect of increasing NAD with intermittent fasting and also with NAD subs, SIRT1 activation, because we know SIRT1 is really important with ovarian function. There's resveratrol coming back into things again, and with a lead in with these types of approaches, then with perhaps either using the fragmentation approach or PRP in the first instance as a procedure, and then seeing what happens down the track from that point.
So folks who are younger, 35-ish, with premature, we call it premature ovarian failure here.
Yes.
And folks who are 40 plus, they can all come to you for similar things, and you'll say, begin with this baseline. That's
right. So I tend to have two groups. And then there's sort of so there's resistant ovary. So ovaries just aren't working as well as they could. And that the commonest group for that is women 40 and over. We do get women, you know, this is the low AMH group.
Yeah.
And the way and then there's the women with POI, and they could be anything from, you know, 20 to 35. Generally. It seems that up, you know, beyond about 9 or 10 years after diagnosis of premature ovarian failure, that probably most of the very, very early follicles have gone. And we don't see much of a response after about 10 years from last period.
Okay.
You know, people clutch at straws. We have groups of people in our society who don't want to use other people's eggs. And that could be religious. I mean, Islam's a very big example of that, but there are other cultural groups that don't do it as well. Some people don't like the idea of it. And all we've got for them at the moment is not having children, which is a pretty stark choice.
Sure.
And you know, doctors don't like the feeling of not being able to help. And therefore you've got to get those people out of your consulting room really quickly because you feel inadequate because you can't do anything for them.
Yeah.
They don't like that because you haven't listened to them.
I love the word that you use, though, choice. It is choice.
It is choice. It is choice. You know, we invariably, as humans, we like to see opportunity. We like to see options. We might not want to entertain them, but we like the fact they might be there.
Sure.
If you've
Sure.
got to go down one line, you've just got to go down one line.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't work out, you kind of go, well, there you go.
I completely understand though. My second reproductive endocrinologist was adamant that he could help improve my egg quality. And I just knew that I was done. I just knew, and I felt at peace with that. But he really tried, and it was really hard for him not to be able to help. He's like, come on, we can do this, we can do that. I'm like, God,
Yes.
thank you, I appreciate it. I'm done.
Yeah, it's a really interesting thing, isn't it? I guess we call that listening, don't we?
Attempting to help, really wanting to help, passion. I call it passion.
Yeah.
You're passionate about helping.
And that's okay. I think it's okay to be there, but in the end, we've got to respect what other people, what they want, and where they want to be. Now, they might not understand it at a particular time, but in the end, they're the ones who get to make the choice, and they've got to be able to make that choice, ideally, freely, and with knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Most of most of the time, when people first see me, they kind of go, "What do we do now?" Seriously, this is a meet and greet. Okay, you got to work out whether I'm nuts or not. I've sent you a whole pile. I'm going to send you a whole pile of information, and you've got to read through and try and work out for yourself whether this is something you're up for or not. And if it's no, that's okay.
Right. We were talking about, I don't know if we were recording it or not, but we were talking, you and I, about the medical community, how it tends to be quite conservative. And so these things that you present to folks can feel like, what?
Yeah.
I've never had a doc tell me how to eat well. There's no teaching on nutrition, apparently. Maybe that's different now. I hope that's different now.
I've got no idea, to be perfectly honest. I think as medical practitioners, we jump to conclusions a lot.
Mm-hmm.
We take shorthand information and we pattern match, and we do that very quickly. Some of it's really straightforward and easy in regard to making a diagnosis. Sometimes people don't want a diagnosis. They just want someone to listen to them.
That's right.
I'm not sure necessarily I'm the right person for them to be talking to in regard to that.
That would be me. That would be me.
But in many ways, look, I'm a gynaecologist. So at the end of it, any woman with abdominal pain that no one else can work out has a gynecological problem.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter as a gynecologist whether you've gone and actually looked at all the things gynecologically and decided that it's not. Mm-hmm. All those other experts out there all say it must be. Mm. And I've missed something. Arrogant bastard. Number of times I've had to write that letter, I tell you.
Arrogant bastards exist everywhere, huh?
They do.
So do kind, compassionate, very truly caring folks. So,
well, look, I think there's a lot of growth that I must admit I don't like looking back at some of the approaches that I took at different stages of my career, and I'm kind of pleased that there's been enough room for growth going forward. And I must admit I've probably still got a fair way to go. But anyway, that's just being human, isn't it?
That's correct. I mean, except for me, I'm completely perfect. But just so you know.
I won't argue.
Still learning. Lots of learning. So I love to end on words of hope and ways that you feel like you can inspire people to move forward with whatever is ailing them. And it sounds like, I mean, truly, you've already given a lot of hope just by talking about these possibilities. It's not conservative medicine is not where it ends. You explore, be open, get creative in your research and listening to other folks who are practicing other kinds of medicine.
I think it's really important. The internet can be good.
Oh, yes.
It can be for
I know where you're going there.
Yes, I loved your statement. Okay, you don't get knowledge from Google. That's
No, Dr. Google, please.
I am so taking that one away. Um, you might get knowledge from Google, but you don't get wisdom from Google.
Oh, well. Oh my gosh, I just did a podcast called You Can't Google Wisdom. Did you listen to that one?
I know. I don't know. I mean, because people can be knowledgeable, but they can't be wise. They're not necessarily wise. Wisdom is context and experience and putting things together and not doing the same stupid thing again. A lot of this stuff we make hard. I don't think it has to be as hard as we particularly want to make it, but until we've got the right tools to be able to see that, we struggle to get there. And that sounds like absolute bollocks. And if I'd said that to myself, even a few years ago, I would have said, "What, you're such a wanker." But it's actually true. And the thing about it is, so how do I do that? Well, by not getting angry, but by educating oneself.
Yeah.
The world can only be improved by educating women, because the two most important women in most blokes' life are their mum and their partner, and they have enormous influence over male behaviour. So, more knowledge, more context, more understanding, more forgiveness for yourself. And that's really cool. A whole pile of things happen, not because you choose it. You can affect those, but there are things that just happen. Sure. And there's no point being cross about that, because they've just happened. Yeah. Road rage, that's ridiculous.
I also like what you said. Maybe, I don't know, I don't remember when that was, the beginning of this conversation. Now you said that you decided to have an openness and an open mind around
mindset. Yes.
Yeah.
How do other people feel about this?
Yeah.
It's hard. I found it really hard. I'd rather know how I felt about something, but that doesn't get us anywhere. That just narrows things down. The open mindset is, how is this going to benefit you? Not to you, obviously, but how's it going to benefit the person I'm talking to? How do I get them to really let me in a little bit, so that I get some feeling of what are they actually after? Maybe I can make a suggestion about something else. Not to drive them down a path that I think is helpful for them, but to supply them with a range of approaches that may be helpful, and let them choose the path that they think is going to be most beneficial for them at a particular time. You've got to grow into things. Yeah.
Well, I think your experience of transitioning over to a more open-minded approach is also useful for your patients, because you get it. You get that it's hard. And
sometimes. Well, my wife and our youngest is also an IVF baby, so we've we've been down that particular path. So
sure have.
Kind of get it, yeah.
You kind of get it a little bit, yeah.
Kind of get it a little bit, yeah.
So there's some more motivation behind this from a personal.
Oh yeah, there was. We were successful, and we don't regret any of these particular things. It was a very interesting experience. It's part of how our life evolves, isn't it? It's part of our own personal growth. Growth. Cool.
Yep. And here's just another option that people can take a look at and feel their way through it. Does this feel right for me? And yeah, I hope folks get some useful information from today's episode and do some research on your website because you have plenty of information there.
And
And
there's a couple of places in the States that are doing this as well. So
yes, I did. I think I got that from your website. I think
yeah.
you pointed folks to a few, maybe 4 or 5 clinics who do ORT.
There were about 3 or 4 years ago. There was a couple. There was San Diego and there was CHR in New York. Last count, about 6 months ago, there were about 20.
Oh gosh, a lot.
So it is available. There's sort of, I think there's a couple in San Francisco doing it, but you know they are around. I don't know what their programs are like or what they're about, but you know it's exciting. It's worth asking.
It certainly is. Thank you so much, Dr. Knight, for all the information, for your wisdom.
Thank you. Oh, look, it's been great fun. Thank you very much. I've really enjoyed it.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Good.